In February 2003, in the bustling city of London, UK, a couple named Amarjit and Nancy Chauhan were celebrating the arrival of their second child, Ravinder, who was 8 weeks old. Their older son, Devinder, was 18 months old. Nancy's mother, Charanjit Kaur, had also arrived from India to join the celebrations.
Aha! Dave! Hello! Nina, 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 Nina!
ช่วยนะครับ
Amarjit, also known as Neil, was a successful businessman who owned an import and export company called CIBA Freight. He was well-liked not just by his family, but also by his employees. Then, on February 13th, Neil drove to Stonehenge for a meeting with potential investors who were interested in buying his company. However, as hours passed, he didn't return home. Nancy tried to contact him but received no response. She then called his office and found out that he had a meeting near Stonehenge. The next day, the staff at CIBA Freight received surprising news. They were told that there was a new boss and that Neil and his family had moved to India. No one questioned this, but it was clear that no one was happy about it. On the day Neil didn't return home, Nancy called her brother, Omkar Varma, who was living in New Zealand. She regularly called her brother to check on his well-being. That day, she told him about her husband's disappearance. She also mentioned that the staff at CIBA Freight had told her that Neil had left for Holland, but she knew his passport was at the Home Office. This made her worry even more. She also told him that on the day Neil disappeared, his co-worker Kenneth Reagan had visited their home and told her that Neil had left a voicemail for her. When she heard the voicemail, her worry intensified. The message was in English, but Neil always spoke to her in Punjabi. This was unusual and added to her growing concerns. Upon hearing the unsettling news, Omkar promptly booked a flight to London. Upon his arrival, he made his way to the family home. The sight that greeted him was far from ordinary.
As I entered the house, I could see the kids' toys on the floor, the baby feed bottles, all the baby feed and the clothes, they were still in the house. I opened the fridge, there was uncooked food inside.
Food was still on the table, an omelette was left on the stove, and bread was scattered across the table. Clothes were still in the washing machine. This didn't look like a home that had been vacated for an overseas move. It seemed as though they hadn't even taken the time to pack. The children's clothing was all left behind. More strikingly, Charanjit Kaur had left her copy of the Guru Granth Sahib on her table. At that moment, Omkar knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that Nancy and her family hadn't simply run away. His mother would never leave home without her Granth. She could leave everything else behind, even her return tickets to India, but she would never abandon her holy book. A fortnight later, a typed letter from Amarjit Chauhan, postmarked from Calais in France, arrived at the relative's home in London. In it, Chauhan reiterated that the family was on the run and on their way back to India. They had had enough of England. Something was off. Chauhan always wrote his letters by hand. Why would he suddenly type one out from France? On March 21, 2003, largely due to Omkar's persistence, the case was handed over to Scotland Yard's Serious Crime Group. There was growing concern at this stage that the family had been abducted or even murdered. Yet, the money in the Chauhan family bank accounts remained untouched. Something had happened to Amarjit, Nancy, Devinder, Ravinder, and Charanjit. But what? The detectives began to delve into their background and their affairs. Did they have a family feud or something similar? They discovered that Neil had a history of tax evasion, and they also found out that his company, CIBA Freight, was involved in the import and export of a substance called khat. Khat is a narcotic shrub grown in Africa, and it gives users a high similar to cocaine. This substance was legal to import in the UK but illegal to export to the USA. They suggested that the police might have found out about this and that's why he fled. But these were just suspicions. As the story unfolds, the detectives delve deeper into the background of their new boss, Kenneth Reagan. Kenneth, a man with a criminal past, had served a 4-year sentence for stalking a woman named Belinda Bruin. Upon assuming his role as the boss, he offered Belinda a job. Despite her reservations, she accepted the offer. On her first day, Belinda fell ill and decided to leave work early. Upon her arrival home, she was surprised to find 2 men, William Hornsey and Kenneth Reagan, on her property with a digger. They claimed to be digging a drainage ditch for her. Taken aback, Belinda ordered them to leave, which they did. Days later, they returned, this time accompanied by a third man, Peter Rees. They informed Belinda that they were adding gravel to another area near her house. This time, Belinda consented, and the men completed their work and left. In April 2003, a father and son, David and Carl Chapman, were enjoying a pleasant evening on the beach. They decided to take their boats out to sea, where they stumbled upon a horrifying sight, a body floating face down.
As we were sort of just canoeing around looking about, I had noticed something, but I just totally discarded it. It wasn't until he sort of shouted body at me, I was just like, what?
David sent Carl home to inform the police and stayed with the body for 3 hours until the authorities arrived. The discovery was grim, but it provided the detectives with a lead in their case. The body was sent for autopsy, where it was revealed that the victim, Neil, had been tied up with plastic tape and brutally beaten. Upon learning about Belinda, the police immediately went to her home to search for evidence. Their investigation unearthed jewelry, hair, and burnt clothing in the soil. The hair was subsequently identified as Neil's. It was as if they had discovered a mass grave, but the bodies were missing. When questioned, Belinda claimed ignorance and voiced her suspicion that Kenneth and his friends were involved. Before the police could apprehend them, Kenneth and William fled to Europe, while their accomplice, Peter Rees, hid in a guest house near the Welsh border. Angered and frustrated by their actions, Peter confessed to his tenant, Wendy Powells, that he was involved in the disappearance of a family. He revealed that Regan had shot down 2 sons, Ravinder and Devinder, and had murdered the entire family. A few days later, local fishermen discovered a woman's body in the sea. It was identified as Nancy. In September 2004, the police finally located Kenneth Regan and his accomplices. They were immediately arrested and charged with the murder of the Chauhan family. In November 2004, the first trial took place at London's Central Criminal Court. During the hearing, the defendants claimed that a drug smuggling gang had forced them to dispose of a body at sea. However, the reality was far different. On that fateful day, Neil had arranged to meet Kenneth Regan near Stonehenge. It was there that Kenneth's partners, William and Peter, abducted Neil. They swiftly transported him to Kenneth's house, where they subjected him to severe torture. Their objective was to coerce Neil into signing documents that would transfer ownership of his company to Kenneth. The motive behind this was Kenneth's desire to use the company as a front for smuggling drugs to various countries. After enduring multiple bouts of torture, Neil finally succumbed and signed the documents. Kenneth then recorded the voicemail message that I mentioned earlier. However, Neil was aware that his life was in danger. Determined to leave a clue that would lead the police to his perpetrators, he found some letters in a drawer. He quickly hid these letters in his socks. These letters contained information about a deal that Kenneth Regan had proposed to Neil. Upon discovering the letters, the police finally obtained solid and crucial evidence for their case. As a result of this evidence, Peter Rees received a 20-year prison sentence, while Kenneth and William were sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of release. Kenneth's greed had led him to commit an unthinkable act against the Chauhan family. Even after the case was resolved, the police were left in a state of shock as the bodies of Nancy's mother and her 2 sons were never found. What are your thoughts on this case? Please share them in the comments section below. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more videos like this one. If there's a specific case you'd like us to cover, please let us know in the comments.